Right, good morning, Dotty McLeod, BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. Now, people who are deaf or have hearing impairments in Cambridgeshire are being offered the opportunity to receive equal access to support from the police. The scheme is known as PLOD, or Police Liaison Officers for Deaf People, and it will act as a kind of contact point. Tiff Lane is the Action Against Hate Coordinator for Cambridgeshire Constabulary. Good morning, Tiff. Oh, Tiff, can you hear me?
I can. Good morning.
Great to have you on the show. Talk to me about this project.
Well, as Action Against Hate Coordinator, part of my job is to try and engage with people who otherwise may not have had a voice. And that part of that is to try and increase awareness about hate crime, but also to try and increase people's reporting of hate crime. And that led me to understand that we had a big gap. Deaf people couldn't always get their voices heard. And so we reached out to other forces who had PLOD, and also the Cambridge Deaf Association have been really, really helpful. And yeah, here we are. We're about to start training 10 officers and staff who can communicate to BSL2, which is probably not the ideal, but it's probably good enough to start with to try and make a difference with reaching out to people with deafness, who have deafness.
And BSL is British Sign Language.
That's it. Thank you. Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
It's a great scheme. It's a great idea. I'm a bit baffled as to why this hasn't existed before.
I totally agree with you. I think people without any form of disability, like myself, going through this role and then sort of your eyes open to just differences, and you're thinking, wow, this is incredible. This is a gap that we just haven't thought of. And so I just think that especially with disabilities, we are very keen and very aware that there are the physical aspects of disabilities, but we don't often see or hear the invisible disabilities. And that's why I think it's taken us such a long time to be aware of this thing that's lacking, really.
Let's bring in Andy Palmer, who's the Chief Executive at the Cambridgeshire Deaf Association, a charity who's been working with Cambridgeshire Police on this. Hi, Andy.
Hello, good morning.
What kind of community, what kind of size of community we are talking about in Cambridgeshire when it comes to people with hearing impairments?
Oh, well, if you're talking about everybody who's got any kind of hearing loss, you're probably in the region of a couple of 100,000 people. But most of those would be people who have got age-related hearing loss. If you're thinking about people who are kind of working age, severe to profound deafness, who use sign language, then you're probably in the region of about 1,000 people.
And is Tiff right that there is a real gap, that there has been a lack of provision for people who struggle to hear or who are completely deaf for accessing the police?
Yeah, Tiff's right, definitely. And we've been working with the police over a few years, talking to the commissioner and paying visits and having a chat. And eventually we came across Tiff, who's made a difference in this case by pushing forward with some changes. But yeah, that's true. We do like about 1,000 referrals for casework a year where we support deaf people. And unfortunately, in the past, there's been regular occurrences where people come to us to try and get support when dealing with the police, really because of the kind of language barrier that exists. So to try and put it into context, imagine the British police only spoke French. What would that do to your accessibility with the police force? It would obviously make it really, really difficult. You'd have to wait for a translator. You couldn't have a conversation in the street. And so all those kind of things get in the way, plus a bit of deaf awareness. But the things that Tiff and the police are doing, which is training up the officers, and also they're going to have interpreters on their mobile phones. So in the street, if a deaf person approaches a police officer, they can get their phone out and access a live sign language interpreter. So that's making great use of technology too. So I hope the number of referrals that we get in the future is going to drop. And I'm just, really, really delighted that we've come to today and the police are putting forward these new measures.
Have you had situations before at the Deaf Association where people are almost reporting crimes to you because they don't know how to report them to the police?
Yeah, that's right. So people will come to us and we'll support them to report a crime. But unfortunately, what would happen kind of fairly regularly in the past is that people would just give up and just report a crime. It then might be difficult to see an officer. They might have trouble getting an interpreter. And so, after so many cancelled and delayed appointments, unfortunately, people would just give up their right to access justice and just say, forget about it, we'll drop it and move on, because the whole thing becomes too stressful. But I think with Tiff there in the police and with the new plod scheme, that will hopefully change in the future. And it means that the deaf community will also have access to the great Cambridgeshire Police force that we've got, that do such a great job for everybody in the county. And now the deaf community are going to get equal access to that, which is good news.
And are you a sign language speaker yourself, Andy?
Yeah, I am. I've got deaf parents and my son's deaf. So I grew up in a house. Most of my family are deaf, to be honest, and sign language users. So I grew up in a house as my first language is sign language. And I use it every day at CDA. We have, I think, about 38 members of staff there now, and 32 of them are profoundly deaf sign language users. So it's essential at CDA to be able to sign every day.
Yeah, I was about to ask you what kind of ride these 10 police officers are about to have trying to learn as adults a brand new language. But I guess you've not actually had that experience with BSL because you learnt it when you were a tot. Well,
that's true. But, I still learn all the time and still try and improve my sign language. But yeah, it is a challenge to learn a new language. But I hope that the officers who put themselves forward, I think they're going to really enjoy the experience. It's going to open their eyes to a whole different community and a whole different culture. In the deaf world, people don't see this, but it's got its own poets, its own actors, politicians, philosophers, scientists, TV presenters, video kind of music stars. It's a whole culture that exists in Britain that exists almost in a way that the hearing community don't even know it's there. So these 10 officers are now going to get the opportunity to connect into that and find out about a whole new world and a whole new community full of interesting people that they wouldn't have met before. So I'm happy for them and obviously be there to support them all the way.
Andy, thanks so much for your time. Do take care. Andy Palmer there, who's the Chief Executive at the Cambridgeshire Deaf Association. And we heard from Tiff Lane, who's the Action Against Hate Coordinator for Cambridgeshire Constabulary and leading on this plod scheme at the police end. It's a good little acronym, that.